Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 263 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are finally going to work on the ingots from our tier 3 ore sorting, which are titanium, cobalt, and gold. Enjoy. Well, the order of these things, titanium is first. So, let's do the titanium ingots first. Well, this method doesn't have any of these ore processors in it, but to make things look kind of straight, we should probably still start it down here. So it has chlorine as an input. And this is set up assuming we would get our 2 whole belts of input. And let's kind of space it out where each of these would be 1 belt plus the fuel. And it looks like, yeah, we're using wood bricks here, but we should just be using carbon. So to do this, we need 2 inserters for the titanium and then 1 for the fuel, but because of needing to fit all of these pipes in here, we should probably space this out a bit. So kind of something like this, and then rotate these around so they match up. That one can be 2 spaces out. That should get everything connected. Yep. Okay. That's all of that. The fuel needs to keep going to a later step. But we need another 6 furnaces. And they don't have to be super close together here. Making the sponges. This fuel belt can go straight through. There we go. Then we have our 3 belts of output here, going into just 2 of the blast furnaces. It's kind of amazing that it can have that kind of output. And an inserter does 8.57. So we essentially need 4 of them, and that gets us our output. Although we also need to get the fuel in there. So that'll be done by those guys. And we just need to cover this on each side. And how's that doing for smushness? Yeah, it seems fine. I think this thing is just offset to the left a little bit, so it looks a little more crowded than it actually is. And then that goes up into our hopefully centered storehouse. Right there. Let's grab some belts so we can apply the logic. And finally, some new stuff. Titanium. And here's something that's going to sort of nuke our factory in a way where we have a lot of buffer we need to fill up. It's not too much buffer, but nonetheless, we have 1,000 at the end, and then all of the other stages leading up to it need to be filled up. So, it's not nothing. Let's get the fuel in there and I guess just kind of stop it there for now. And we probably don't need all of these trees either. So I guess it can come in on this belt right here. We did kind of place this a little lower. It's not actually lined up the way that other machines are. Because that would be right here. And another thing we need to get here is the chlorine. And that's actually a little tricky because chlorine isn't being shipped on our little pipe bus here. So I think this setup generated its own chlorine, but I'm not sure that's logistically better than just putting chlorine on a pipe and sending it down, because if we did this, we would have to send saline water up there, hydrogen back, and sodium hydroxide back, compared to just sending the chlorine up to begin with. So, I think we're going to do chlorine. No, we can't cross over here, because the giant mess that is whatever this is. So it's going to do that. And all of these chlorines are hooked up together. The factory doesn't have a central chlorine repository, but this is probably the absolute #1 location that would make it. So it seems to make a lot of sense to just send it from here. So there's our chlorine pipe going back, and it stops here because where we actually need it is not very far away. Chlorine is flowing in each of these. It's time to watch the resources flow here and see what happens to all this nice titanium. Well, nothing, because I am sending wood blocks up there, but it needs to be carbon. Okay. So this is making the titanium tetrachloride. And these belts need to go a little bit further. And it's not quite connected here. There we go, making the titanium sponges, which is a funny idea of a rock being a sponge, but I suppose it makes sense. And actually this needs to be a faster belt. Well, at least it needs to be fast up until here. And I believe after this point, it can just be a yellow belt, because we don't have red belts on our person right now. So the sponges made it all the way down here. Those filled up. And you can see that just running this has dropped our titanium to 7.5. Isn't quite enough for it to run yet, but now that it's the lowest thing, that is what the crystallizers are producing again. But it's filled up. So now we can send the fuel down for the last step. In perfect autosave. But because of inserter and belt speed limitations, we can't quite get the full belt out of this. Perhaps if we put one more on the end there, we could. But too late. We're filled up with our ingots. Okay. The next one was cobalt. And cobalt is incredibly easy. 2 blast furnaces, and that's it. Kind of makes me wonder where that cobalt oxide comes from. Well, it comes from mixing limestone in. So then what does it go into? It goes into lithium cobalt oxide, which is for batteries. There's sodium cobaltate, which goes into RTGs. So we do kind of need some of it, just not very much. But because we need it, and the cobalt ore is right here, we probably should produce it. So let's make another line here, and just add this, and say the output we want is 60 of each, because we certainly have the space for it. Okay, well the first part is just this, and let's just put some spaces out there, I guess. And we're going to need a ton of limestone. Luckily it's limestone, not lime. But we also have our setup here making one full belt of it. That between every setup, how much are we going to need in total? 52. But that requires that iron runs, lead runs, and then cobalt runs. So I feel like we can just kind of take it from here and just hope that all 3 of them don't run at the same time. And if they do, well, we can deal with it later. Well, this is going to be inserter limited without going nuts. So knowing that, time to pull the speed module out of it and see what it does. Well, that's a little better. Let's see what it looks like with the speed module again. Yeah. So actually it could work like this, where this is the long-handed inserter. And it doesn't quite reach because of power poles, but we'll fix that. So we can pick this up, plop it down again, to get all these reaching. And the cobalt will just keep going forwards beyond this. But we got to get the limestone in there. It'll come in right there. And then the carbon will come up through here. And it'll just go all the way up to the top. With the same setup as this, basically. Because it's not much different. And basically, it'll just move on past. So, this will have priority in the beginning. And that's fine. Doesn't really matter. We just want to have it available. And probably put it on a train. So in that sense, we'll probably have 2 storage warehouses up here. It'll be kind of like this, I suppose, where we're making the powder and setting it up. So it actually might not really need a storage warehouse. It'll just go to a train somewhere, like down here or something. I am kind of wondering if these setups end up being a lot narrower than they are now, that a lot of these train stations might be picked up and moved to squish them down. So that's kind of something I'm kind of dreading, but it might work out. And it probably won't be able to fully max out these 2 belts. But whatever. So these need to come up from somewhere. They'll just go here, I guess. Then the carbon fuel can come in here, get lined up, come up there. And we are going to need enough of it to require the red belt. Actually, due to the quantity, we might have to pick it up from the sides. Okay, well, we'll keep this limestone going then. Just jump over everything. And these will come up right here. And we only have a couple thousand of these, so this is definitely going to trash the system for a while. Okay, so switched over to the cobalt ingots with the correct modules. That will basically do that. So we've got to get the next warehouse lined up. Set to cobalt. I think that's most things connected. Now we just have to wait for the bots to deliver them all. Or can help them out a little bit. They basically did their job. And then poor Cobalt's going to go down and every single method under the sun's going to turn on. All 2 of them. To make our Cobalt. So this will not be able to keep up with 60 per second anytime soon. But when we unlock our direct ore sorting method, then all we'll have to do is put that method in, and then this will work. Okay. Well, we should be able to see how most of this works. Let's unhook these first to check the speed. We'll need this for our new batteries. Seems fine. Because of inserter limitations, it's not going to completely max it out, but close enough. And Cobalt is gone. Just like that. Nothing is left. But it's full with what we got. So we can test it out. And I guess we can kind of extend this out a little bit too. Kind of in 2 different spots. But here we go. Making the ingots. And there we go. We've got what we've got. We can push these up here to remind us it needs to go somewhere sometime. I see all the artillery ammo made it, which is good news. Okay. One more new resource to go. Gold. And gold, well, I'm happy we moved that chlorine over here because gold's going to need it too. It's as simple as making the cobalt is, except there's nothing else we need to do with it, so it's just going to be a straight line going all the way up. But so be it, nothing wrong with that. And it's going to be like this one. So how many spaces are in here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 empty spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then it's just the fuel and the items. I'll use the same sorting warehouse here. It's totally not required for this, but everything else has it, so I'm going to put it here too. And this will use just regular fuel blocks, because when there's no other resource we need to use, those are the ideal fuel to use, so might as well. And then we got some gold to move up here. Come here, grab this. Man, that cobalt is being made slowly. But it is what it is. Okay, these things are going to need the chlorine, and I'm assuming we can rotate them so it can come in right here, but bots are about to get here, so I'm hoping they're about to place them. How are we doing on all the biter souls? Pretty good. 140,000 or 282 stacks, so it's going down. We are slowly working our way through it. And it's been a while since we've given the bots some parking spaces. So let's do that here. So we didn't quite smush into this, but we got kind of close. I'm pretty happy with that spacing. It's about the best we can hope for. But let's swap this over to gold. And I guess we can use the left side here, because that'll be closer to the chlorine. So it's flowing in there. Yeah, this is a reminder of the early days of doing ingots, where all you had to do was pipe some fuel in, maybe like oxygen or something, and then the ore, and then you got ingots. And now we're into 5-step monstrosities like this. Oh, there it is. Great. Actually, let's wait a second and let it compact. There we go. So we can see how it works. Also, perfect autosave moment. Seems to be doing pretty good. And filled up. So there we go. Those are all of our new resources ready to be put on our new ingot bus. And hopefully we have room for the final stage, turning it into coils. But if not, we can move them, because there is quite a bit of space put in here, so room for expansion. But one other thing we need to do is handle the steel ingots, because those are an ingot type that needs to be moved along. And we had the little nub here for the fuel belt that needed to keep going. But honestly, it'd be very similar to this, just slightly newer machines. Otherwise, the idea is almost exactly the same. Because we're not going to gain any efficiency by rebuilding this, we're just going to have greater degrees of inserter limitation. I'm actually kind of fine just leaving it the way it is and not really rebuilding it. We got some belts which won't be hooked up anymore, at least going this direction. So I don't really see the value in rebuilding it right now, because I don't really think there's anything wrong with it. It could benefit from speed modules. And I suppose we could put the better machines in here So we'll go with Blast Furnace 2 into Blast Furnace 3 and upgrade the other little bits. And when we remember, we can put some better modules in here. Probably like the efficiency and pollution. And we'd want to make some changes to this. Probably make this red just to make sure there's no throughput limitations. Hey, I see that we're finally building some cobalt again. So that's about to catch up. Okay. Probably get rid of that pole for now. But let's pick up the whole thing and just get it lined up with this warehouse. Although we were going to move it, so I guess it should be lined up here instead, because we wanted to get all that positioned in the same location. So it would be lined up with here, but positioned right there. The fuel would go all the way down, and I guess we were turning it red before, so we might as well do the same thing. Well, at least up to here, because I don't want to have to go through all of that. Okay, well, we've got our iron set up, which is placed kind of in a weird spot. I think that teleporter can stay, because we need to pick up basically this whole thing, but don't have any of the extra stuff. So nothing from that setup, and that looks good. So we want to get it up here, lined up with that warehouse, and positioned over a few squares so it's not mashed in there. And this looks pretty good, but some of this stuff is still in the way, I guess. Oh, because it's not being removed. So there we go. Let's wait a little while for everything to get connected. And while we're here, I suppose, we can extend the robot network. It is a little annoying that this isn't completely lined up with this stuff here, because it was squished to be as small as it could be. But if it was lined up, it would bump into stuff here. So I think I'm fine with that one being pushed up a little, because it is lined up with the top, just not the bottom, because we kind of changed the way that things were done further down. But if we move this down, then it means that all this charging port stuff and all of these ingots would have to be moved, so I'm not sure I want to do that. Although steel ingots do need to have their storage warehouse to be similar to everything else. Well, while we're waiting for all of this to get hooked up, one thing we can try to put to the test is getting all these ingots where they need to go, and all the other junk. So first we have to shut this down to make sure they go to where they need to, and probably add all of the other ingot types, because we basically want none of them. And we're going to get a lot of it in our inventory when we are making the bus and modifying it. So now we can start picking up junk from there. And robots should come here to help out. I guess I'll give them a spot to put stuff for now. Although one thing we could do is just sort of pick this thing up and line it up with everything else, just so it looks about the same, because it bothers me that all the warehouses aren't in the same spot. Probably wasn't ready to actually fire this up yet, but whatever. was just moving items around, but we already tested it before, so there's no reason to expect that it wouldn't work. So let's just hook everything back up and get all these items out of our inventory. Kind of manually placing some of this stuff that we are unlikely to ever have in the inventory ever again, while things like ingots are being automatically moved around. So here's just some more junk that we grab. Okay, I think that makes the inventory pretty clean. That we got rid of the storage warehouse that was here. So now everything is fairly straight again and up here, and this has 8 belts going in, so it's enough for 4 for the bus and 4 to come over here. We might want to have some kind of priority, but it's not strictly required at the moment because it can actually handle both, so we'll just hook up the oxygen and put some efficiency modules in all this stuff. And that should be enough to test it. As much as we can, because we already have all of the steel ingots in there. And I see that we have 23k of manganese ore, so our priority of using iron seems to have worked to an extent. And almost maxed out on nickel. But there we go. With that, we have our entire ingot setup all done. Steel setup, iron, copper, lead, tin, manganese, nickel, silicon, silver, aluminum, zinc, titanium, cobalt, the special type of cobalt, and gold. So from here, we're going to need to figure out how big the ore bus is going to be and where the lines are. And then from there, we're going to have to squish down all of these setups. Certainly in the vertical direction, we're going to want to squish them down, but you also might want to squish them horizontally as well, because it's almost to the end of the land mass, and we're only going to add 1, 2, 3, 4 more train stations, at least. So this could definitely benefit from getting narrower, and a lot of sections aren't that wide to begin with. Like, these are very narrow. And some of these are wide to have expansion, but they never ended up needing them. So we want to try to narrow it down if we could. Moving stations is a little annoying, but they are LTN stations, so it's not like it's that big a deal. We would just pick them up and move them, so it shouldn't be too much effort. But otherwise, looking pretty good. That's stage 1 and stage 2 of the process, and the final step is making everything into coil form. But that's going to have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.